And continuing on this conversation about data, data is the fuel that powers these technologies. And it's obviously very important in the biomanufacturing and biopharma industry at large. So I want to ask you guys a little more about data, not only data quality as it relates to training models, but also I would like you guys to address some concerns about data collection, data storage, and data security. Um, so starting with quality, how can the industry better ensure the quality of data being used to train systems? Tugce, you're on my screen, so maybe if you'd like to.
Yeah, so I see as a critical problem in every projects we do. So we either don't have data, or we have inconsistencies within the data, duplicate data. So we need to, in some cases, for example, we have to extract data from a memory of the equipment, or transfer it into a digital format from lab notebooks. So I see the industry is at different phases of digital transformation. Some of them have already did a lot of progress, but some of them are still, in the earlier phases of digital transformation. And I think it's important, again, to have this shift in mindset and promote the culture of data-driven decision-making in the company through trainings, standardization, guidelines, maybe some automated checks and screenings. I think it's an important culture to establish in the first place.
Would anyone else like to speak to that point?
I agree with Tugce said. I just want to add one small point here is that presumably when people think about AI, machine learning models, they're thinking about prediction problems. But in many cases, you don't have a prediction problem, you have a decision problem. And your decision isn't something you are going to predict, right? Your decision is something you're going to make based on the factors you're going to predict. So I think realizing that is actually very important, and seeing what's in the data, but we also need to understand the story behind the data. Tugce earlier mentioned the retail setting. Even in the retail industry, people make a lot of foolish mistakes just by relying on data they have without knowing the context behind the data. For example, this was one of the best known e-retailers. Years ago, they dropped the price of one product. So then they look at the demand, and demand didn't increase, demand actually decreased. So then they spend a lot of time figuring out why the demand decreased after you increase the price. Turns out that was a really simple story. Simple story was that what they have is that for the data point, the demand is only demand for that one day. Whereas before making the price change, the demand data was for a whole week. But I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that that's a very silly, very, very dumb story. But there are many, many cases, if you don't know what's really going on with that particular data point, we could make a lot of mistakes. The other aspect about importance of ensuring quality in data training is that the training data you have, that needs to more or less reflective of real-world decision-making environment. It should not have features that you don't have in a real-world environment, because otherwise you can have a very good model that performs very, very well, but when you try to use it, apply it in reality, it performs very poorly because this leakage problem. Just like if you're trying to train, again, a child to do well in math test, if you tell the child the answers to every question, they're doing very, very well. But when they actually have the real exam, they don't have the answers, right? That's also the challenge you have when train AI machine learning models. In many cases, that feature is actually indicative, what you are going to predict. If it's actually part of the training process, you are getting artificially high-performing models that will not do well in the real world.
Thank you, Tinglong.
Yeah, I would like to step back a little bit, and before even going into training more data into for biomanufacturing applications, I I would like to refer to one of the interesting talk I heard from Wendy, CEO of Automate. Which is a universal concept as a three-step model with regard to the real application of data, AI in data modeling. The first one is the pilot with an intent, right? It's going to be very, very crucial why we need AI modeling inside biomanufacturing, and then understand the value for what you want out of it from that data modeling. And then perfect partnership with different departments or regulatory bodies. So it's a combination of all this will determine what kind of data has to be, and what kind of security layers has to be put in, what kind of data integrity has to be, or infrastructure has to be put in place. So it's a combination. It's not easy to say, okay, this is the right data. This is going to be the paradigm for the whole process. As Tugce and Tinglong mentioned, there is need for oversight bodies, expert subject matter to get involved, and several departments has to work cohesively to make sure that the data from the pilot studies, different case studies, and then understand and validate and create a roadmap for AI implementation in biomanufacturing specifically.
Thank you, Dean. To pull on that a little further here, I know in our earlier conversations, Dean, you actually mentioned the issue of data silos. And to some degree, data silos are inevitable, as predictive tools are IP of each manufacturer. But are these silos a concern to regulatory agencies, would you say? And how can we mitigate siloing, whether within an organization or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. Interesting question you brought up. So I would like to refer an interesting TED talk from Andrew, the expert in AI. If you see his AI long tail problem, so AI was developed based on high value in ad research and web search initially, and that's why it penetrated into tech. But if you see the long tail problem in AI is individual silos of applications. He would have mentioned pizza modeling, pizzeria, how it's working, t-shirt modeling, or biomanufacturing. Biomanufacturing is one of a silo, and within biomanufacturing, there's going to be multiple verticals that it's going to operate independently. For example, regulatory aspects, audits, and then vendor management, supply chain. So within the biomanufacturing, there are multiple silo of verticals that eventually have to work together. So this is what I meant. And this is within. And if you see interim biomanufacturing, like different industry, different manufacturing are going to be also independent, because this is not one fit AI system. To be honest, it's each one has its own IP, its own protection in manufacturing, and that has to be protected. Otherwise, the industry will not survive, right? That's the uniqueness or differentiation in the market. And that kind of variable has to be there in the manufacturing space, specifically in biomanufacturing. And you need to protect that as well. So, but then that raises a question of data silo, because there is going to be always the individual companies needs to protect their IP and develop their own in-house AI solutions for their technology development or manufacturing. And that is going to be a biggest challenge, because interoperability, like in EHR, when EHR came in, it's a similar system. Now it's going to come into AI, where there's going to be a silo of data among several manufacturing industries. But there is some aspects that can be shared without sharing the IP, that it can help the whole process of going to market from, instead of taking 10 years, probably 1 year, 2 year, which we already learned from COVID, but I think that's going to change a lot.
Thank you, Dean. And when we're talking about security and protecting data, how do we protect data enough to try to mitigate silos, but also to encourage wider adoption, I suppose, because I believe data security is a concern, especially with companies like CDMOs, for example. So do you agree that security might keep people from adopting these technologies, and how do we adequately protect data that these technologies can collect and learn on? Tinglong, you're on my screen, so if you want to
Yes, of
start
course.
that off.
I'm always on screen. I think the key here is to ensure people benefit from these technologies. I mean, people, of course, security is an ever-growing concern. You always worry about security. You always want to protect your data because that's part of your resources. That's something you don't want anyone take them away from you. But if people see enough value from these AI models, you'll be surprised about how willing people are in sharing their data. Let me give you one example from our consumer technology. I think 10 years ago, if you tell people that you are going to have this little device in your living room or in your bedroom that listening to 24/7, every conversation, everything you say, it's going to be listening to you, it's going to be understand you. How do you feel about it? I think most people say that you're crazy. No way, absolutely, I'm not going to do it. But right now, and we all have this thing, right? The smartphone or your Alexa or your Google Assistant, whatever it is listening to you 24/7 because it provides some practical utility. It can play music, or it can help you open your navigation software when you're driving. It's tiny utility, but it's practical. It's reliable enough that people are willing to share the most private moments with tech companies, even when we are not sure what Apple or Amazon are going to do with our data. So I would argue that a lot of times when we see people are hesitant to share the data, I would ask ourselves, are we generating enough value to justify the tremendous risk of leaking data or taking data away from departments? There should be more of discussion about the value created by these models and how the values are equitably distributed among stakeholders.
Thank you, Tinglong. Anyone else care to add to that point?
Yeah, if I may. So I would like to add one analogy to this, or an application already we've been using. So a simple example is Google Map. Everybody uses Google, and they track the whole aspect, the travel of the human, and then their everyday activities, and then suggest several businesses based on how we are traveling. But if you say a similar thing to relating to the biomanufacturing, specifically personalized medication, right? In terms of biomanufacturing, specifically cell and gene therapy, it's more tailored to specific patient related technologies, right? But again, why I'm asking this question, mentioning this is particularly with regard to their data security, right? Here, the patient privacy and security is very, very important, because this can be misused by the insurance companies or regulatory bodies. How important that is going to be protected, that is going to be the key to biomanufacturing, because patients are a little concerned when it comes to gene therapy and AI's involvement in biomanufacturing, specifically in personalized medication.
Good point, Dean. Thank you. Tugce, I had a question for you, given your background. It's around infrastructure, and I'm curious if you could tell these folks what infrastructure is necessary when it comes to managing data and a connected network of automated systems, and in AI and ML in biomanufacturing?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a fast evolving field itself. So lots of hardware, software, infrastructures are emerging. And right now, with especially new sensors like Raman spectroscopy, for example, with these Raman probes, you can collect so many data that you were not able to collect previously. But then we also have a luxury problem now. What type of data, additional data, do you want to collect? How often do you want to collect? Right? Maybe it's enough if you collect every 10 minutes. Maybe you don't want to overload your system with collecting data every second, or maybe not. How often do you collect? Where do you put these sensors? How do you store these systems? How do you make sure that your system is capable of processing this data in real time? Translate that into optimum control. So these are all very relevant questions. Also, a lot of open research is here. But yeah, with these new technologies, a lot of things are possible now. But the question is, how do you make the best use of these technologies?
Yeah, thank you. I just have one more question here, but before I get to it, Miles, would you mind putting up our second poll question for the audience? They can answer while I ask the question, the panelists' follow-up question. Poll question number 2, what are you considering artificial intelligence and machine learning for? Is it drug discovery, process optimization and control, real-time monitoring and adaptive manufacturing, automated data processing and analysis, quality control, or clinical trial design? While the audience answers that, I wanted to ask all of you about unstructured data. I recently attended the Bioprocessing Summit in Boston, and several people there spoke about the problem with unstructured data. So to dig into that a little bit, how much of an issue is unstructured data, and how can companies be proactive in avoiding future problems with unstructured data as it applies to adoption of these technologies? And should they begin efforts to structure this data now, even if they don't have immediate plans to adopt AI, ML, etc.? I don't know who would like to start off.
Well, I'd be happy to talk about that broadly. On broad term, I think this notion of unstructured data is a slight tweak from this notion of big data, data analytics. There was, I think, between 2008, 2016, roughly speaking, that's the era of big data. Big data era is all about data, right? But the problem with this big data era, big data thinking, is that you need to have that data and put it in a spreadsheet. So you have to fit that into your Excel. Otherwise, you cannot analyze it. So this notion of unstructured data is just richer. It's more realistic. So not just numbers. Now you have human language, you have human speech, you have images, you have videos, you have audio that come from all sizes, all shapes, all forms. So you're not going to be able to build a regression model or explainable model for this unstructured data. So, but McKinsey did a report back in 2019 before the pandemic. They were saying that 2/3 of the value generated by AI models will come from unstructured data, not structured data. I think that makes sense because we haven't really explored the value of unstructured data in systematic manner. We have a lot of models. Right now, I guess the golden standard is generative AI model, large language models. But the problem is that we haven't got to the point that they give us reliable, stable performance that we can really trust them to do what they're supposed to do. I guess arguably you could say that computer vision models are quite mature, but even that also depends on specific industry settings, require a lot of rigorous testing. But it is true that we have to be able to use unstructured data along with the structured data for us to really unlock the value of AI.
Thank you, Tinglong. Does anybody else want to go before I ask Miles to post the results of that poll question? I'm curious how you guys
just to add.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Dean.
just to add on to what Tinglong mentioned, again, I would like to bring an analogy with EHR, medical health record, right? So it was implemented in the early 70s. And if you see amount of data collected over a period of time, there's so much of unstructured data. And still there is a huge task remaining on understanding the clinical side at clinical side and analyzing the data behind the health records. And so many companies are still working on it. But I think with biomanufacturing, this is just the beginning of the new space where we're still trying to categorize several unstructured data, and how we are going to utilize that in the biomanufacturing is going to be a big question moving forward. But of course, I don't think it's going to take so long because of the advancement in the technology and modeling. I think it's going to be a little shorter time period, but time only can answer how long it's going to take. But it's a must to address.